become an iconic figure and a hero, and then one last thing at the end of their life that they do may be questionable. And it seems to, at the time, it will undo every good thing that they had done. And it's just something about the human attention in a particular era that they're always almost looking for someone to do something bad or something to radically change your opinion of them. And I often thought of this as this woman's final vocabulary. The last thing she gave to her contemporaries was, yes, I was a teacher. Yes, I went over the Niagara Falls in a barrel. So you kind of, like, if she died before this, it would have been, well, she was a, teacher. She was the daughter of, in a family. She had 8 other siblings. She seemed to be a little bit entrepreneurial. But the final vocabulary now is that she's gone over in this barrel. It really whites out all the other accomplishments that she's had in her life. So that's, this is what I would call a seismic event in somebody's biography. Her old memory, whited out. And no matter what her name, see, I was also thinking about this too, like, no matter what her name, like, her name was Annie Taylor. Annie was very, like, they used to have, like, Annie Oakley, Annie Taylor. Annie was a very kind of popular name. It says a lot about her that she's colloquial. She doesn't, even though she has a stern look on her face. Again, not sure if it was the result of the barrel. But if you think about it, no matter whose final vocabulary, people, if they say somebody went over the Niagara in a barrel and then someone said, oh, it was Annie Taylor, and people say, well, most people would think, no, it couldn't have been the Annie Taylor who was the teacher. It must have been another Annie Taylor. And, and I started thinking more about that, is that you actually think about it, there was probably no Annie Taylor that somebody would say was the one. They would always think it was another Annie Taylor. Like if they knew, if someone knew an Annie Taylor who was a seamstress, and they said, "Oh, she went over the Niagara in a barrel," and they say, "Well, no, that doesn't. Must have been another Annie Taylor. Here's an Annie Taylor that's, I don't know, someone who was is out washing clothes along the river." And people know that Annie Taylor. And someone said, even though it was close to the river and an affiliation to with water, they said, no, I couldn't see her still going over Niagara in a barrel. No, not Annie Taylor. Maybe Annie Oakley, because she had a kind of wilder reputation. More of a Dale. You see her kind of shooting. She was involved in a lot of gunfire, and they did a play, a musical on her. Again, there was a lot of carnies back then. And, always looking to make a buck. And again, I think she was able to, I think she died in 1921, so she was in her 80s, when she died, before the stock crash. Look, she even has the date, when she went over in the barrel. It says, and I don't know who, F.M. Russell, I think, was her handler. He was kind of her manager. I'm sure he was someone who came out of the carnival industry, knew how to make a buck on this kind of sideshow. I'm trying to think, I mean, back to, her teaching career. Clearly she didn't teach physics, because she would have known then that there was really, this was a rash decision to climb in there. I mean, no controls whatsoever. Once you're in the barrel and you're in the water, fluid, there's some complicated differential equations to kind of, for the control conditions to make this work. So, she was just really leaving it up to the wind. Was the barrel going straight? Was it spinning? It could have been going top over bottom. If she got into it, now come to think of it, I don't know, was she heavy enough to submerge the barrel where she was kind of standing head up? I think I'd like that perspective. If I was in the barrel, I would have liked the barrel to be kind of my head, just as if I was standing in the water, but moving. And then when you went to fall, I could see some challenges with that. And then if it's going end over end, And depending on how you hit, if you hit, maybe that's why it's tapered at the bottom there. It's probably trying to. There must have been a very master coopersmith who put that barrel together to make sure that she had the best chance of landing feet first. She must have went in, crawled in, feet at the bottom toward the tapering, because that would make more sense that you hit the water like that, less chance of a head injury. But later on, when I looked at some of the history, someone had ultimately stolen the barrel, and then later on they found it in Chicago, and then later it was stolen again. So she had a hard time, even though this was, again, this was like the final thing which described this woman's life. And then, other people, they took the barrel as a novelty. So I expect this, I do watch the Antique Roadshow, and I would like to see, I would challenge people to come up, whoever has this barrel, to please bring it to the roadshow, have them assess it, and then from there we can decide where this has to go to from a posterity perspective. Like, who should own this? Should an individual own this, or should an institution? I know the museum in Niagara would probably love to have this item. They do have a replica. They tried probably the best they could do with this particular picture. I'm not sure the kind of wood that was used, but they made sure that the number of hoops around the barrel were the same. I think it's not a lot to ask that if the roadshow comes by, bring the barrel in. Let us decide. No one will judge you or your ancestors. You can always say that you just found it, and you moved in, and it was there, and it was in the crawl space, and you never really thought of it. I guess it's hard to deny. See, the problem is you show up with that, it's like, it has a name. It says Annie Edison Taylor. Like, even another, Annie Edson Taylor, not Edison, which would have been interesting if she was related to Edison. That would, I think there would be inventing light. Yeah, probably has more of an impact on humanity. But going out in the barrel, within the family circles, she would have probably a notch above Edison, even with all his money. She would ultimately have, in a hero culture, in a culture of honor, she would probably fare very well in that family gathering. People would want to hear this. Some people would want to hear about the invention of the light bulb, and the roll top desk, and Edison sleeping in the roll-top desk, but she just has to talk about the barrel. I could see the nieces and nephews